to speak to me today. Um, as you know, I do a lot of work in the community, and one of our primary focuses the primary focus is gentrification, because the majority of our residents are renters, and of course, affordability is a big issue. And the segue is that's how we met. So tell everybody who you are.
So I'm Jacob Vallo. I currently am the Senior Director of Transit-Oriented Development, Real Estate, and our public art program called Artbound at MARTA, the public transit agency in the Atlanta region.
Oh, wait a minute. That's a new title that I'm hearing with the art, right? What did you say, public?
Yes, so Artbound is our public art program.
Right.
And it has been under my group for a bit, but we've started announcing it more as, a more pronounced program. It's been around for about 4 years now.
Okay.
And keeps getting bigger and better every year.
So I'm going to ask you to lead with, because you said you had a funny story of how we met.
So let's see. So prior to going to MARTA, I was actually at a space company, but before that, I was at the West Side Future Fund.
Right.
And I think maybe I was a month in, and we had a series of meetings with community members in the various neighborhoods of the 4 neighborhoods. So we had our Vine City community meeting, and that is where I met Colette. And
yes.
I was one of a few people who were in the meeting from the West Side Future Fund, and I remember Colette, the first question she asked me was, why are you here and who are you? And it was a very assertive question, and one that ultimately I was a little fearful of where this conversation was going.
Really?
I really was. And but I answered the question. I explained who I was and why I was there, and I was there to do good work and bring a skill set to the table to help people. And ultimately, we just sort of hit it off. And
that's true.
But I was scared at first.
I don't even see myself as a scary person. However, what we were meeting about was the West Side Future Fund's land use plan. And by the time you had came into the picture, it was after we had done all of that work with Dayru. So at the time, which is probably why they had you come in on that meeting, nobody was happy with what Dayru had come up with. Right. So community, well, you don't work there anymore, so I could say it. What the plan looked like at the time was, from the community's vision, is that they put all the legacy residents in this one pocket. Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, the neighborhood's gonna have the poor people section, like, y'all gonna segregate us in the neighborhood? So there was a little distrust coming in at the time, because we were working with APD Urban. Mm-hmm. So Jesse had been doing all that work, and then it's like, okay, they got us in the room with the big suits. What's
right. Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting situation to walk into, because you knew immediately, whether you were listening to the conversation or just the energy in the room, that there was an enormous trust deficit that needed to be overcome. And being new to the situation, I didn't really understand the backstory all that much. And so, like I said, I was highly cautious going into the discussion. And you could just read people's body language. Like the consulting team, in many cases had their laptops open, which creates almost like a physical barrier between them and the community. But I think it was because they weren't. It created a safe space almost, because people didn't really know what was going to be shared, And but yeah, having not gone through the community engagement process, I wasn't a beneficiary of hearing what people were saying,
right.
and listening, and whether or not those comments that were made by the community actually made it into the plan. And
actually, they did. Like the work that we were able to do following that. I mean, you know from your current position that is our plan, but inside this space, you raised a really interesting issue when you're talking about the physical barrier or the discomfort and the distrust, because you and I were able to bridge that over art.
Right.
He showed me his artwork. You came to my house with your family. I think we were having a youth group
That's right.
meeting.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's how our relationship actually started, from our shared interest around youth, kids, and art, and I think it flowed from there. Which honestly, you built a lot of trust with a lot of community members. Because I'll never forget that day you guys were painting the apartment building. I don't know what they.
That was fun. That was my last day at the West Side Future Fund, and I'll come back to that story. But it's fun. I mean, I think that I painted J.R. Murphy, a portrait of him. I painted a portrait of Pastor Debbie, and Tillman Ward, and other members of the community, and other things that were taking place while we were doing the work we were on the West Side. And some people enjoy storytelling, in the written form, and some in different digital media formats and whatnot. But I was sort of documenting my experience on the West Side through the connections I was making with people, and I feel most comfortable in painting, or actually doing digitally on my iPad, and so it was great because I was having these encounters with members of the community, and then taking what I was feeling and what I was hearing and translating it into physical form.
And I really think that that's why, as a collective, it's almost like some of us when we were saddened when you left, because we really felt like you understood us. Like, we really felt like you heard us, you understood where we were coming from. You're like, I felt like your art reflected that. And for that reason, of course, you and I kept in touch. But I was so excited to find out you were at MARTA. It was like, whew. He's at MARTA. We have somebody on our side. And leave it to Jacob. And I'm going to let you discuss the semantics of it. But from our point of view, another issue that we were having around affordability was the adjusted median income. And for people who don't understand, look, I'm not the finance person, you are. So explain what adjusted median income is to a lay person.
Sure. So the adjusted median income that is typically used, and this is really a definition by the Housing and Urban Development, Federal Housing and Urban Development. It's used for the basis of how you determine what the rents are going to be at a particular affordable housing project or units that are designated as affordable housing or workforce housing units. And what the general Atlanta area does is they use the AMI for what is the Atlanta MSA, so it includes Sandy Springs and Marietta. And that number is a very macro number. So in many cases, it's like using, a sledgehammer solution to what should be a hyper-local, more surgical solution, which is providing units for the community in which you're developing, right? So in Vine City, for instance, the median income is $26,000.
Right.
So if you use the Atlanta MSA median income, it's like $63,000. And so if we at MARTA held our developers to the standard of the Atlanta MSA, we would essentially be supporting delivering units that the community members that live around our station could not afford.
Right.
So I'm like, what's the point?
Which is why I was excited to find out you were at MARTA, because what he's just explained is mass displacement.
Mm-hmm.
If you know
it's
the
a
majority
mismatch of what the need is.
Yeah. So on the community side, there are a lot of us raising the issue, and people really don't understand because we get comfortable thinking, oh, we've got a mayor named Keisha, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I voted for her too. But at the same time, all of the development, like I think 98%, and unfortunately Erica is not here because she was at the Department of Planning at the time, but 98% of the new projects going up in Atlanta are luxury housing. So not only could we not afford it in Fine City, nobody in the city can afford it. Nobody in the city can afford it. But there's a saying in the Black community, like when white folks have a cold, Black folks get pneumonia. And of course that deals with all the economic disparity and what have you. So, Jacob, have you been on TV before? About what MARTA is doing, TOD? I mean, recently.
No, not unless you count, presenting to the city's transportation committee. So there's that one station.
This is a news flash because this is why community loves Jacob. What did you do at MARTA?
So in November, we took to the board 6 projects that are on the West Line and the South Line of MARTA, stations that are on the South and West Line. And we received approval to do a public solicitation for mixed income housing at these stations, but tied to zip code AMI. And we were the first group to actually do that. And it's been very well received, not only in the community, but also elected officials have recognized that it's a smart thing to do. And so we're, getting a lot of good feelings from it, and we're in the execution process now to get the RFP out and figuring out. Now the challenges with doing zip code AMI is it means you have lower rents, so
right.
It makes the financing equation more complicated.
Which is, I think, the reason why. Sometimes we attack people instead of attacking problems. Mm-hmm. So I really think, and this is why I say I voted for the mayor. Mm-hmm. Like, we live in a capitalist society, so we can scream affordable housing all day long, but that means that you have to convince developers to lower their profit margin.
Mm-hmm. And it's even, you hit the nail on the head. The capitalistic society model is really what's driving all this. Is it's not even just the developer. You have to go back further to who is funding the project, right? And ultimately, you've got lenders and you have equity investors. And if you have a series of investment opportunities in the region, take a fund manager or investment fund manager who's sitting in New York. They've got a desk full 20 some odd transactions that they can put their capital into. And if this one has a 20% annual return and this one has a 20% annual return, they go in this pile. If you have lower rents because of generally where the project is located and the requirement for affordability, it's going to have costs all being the same, construction costs all being the same, land costs will vary, then the returns will be lower. And so they go in a pile over here, right?
So even though it's not, I don't want to say that is redlining in the traditional way that we think of redlining. Mm-hmm. Like it may not be with the intention of these Black people live here, but at the same time, the results feel the same, and it's because of the profit margin. So now you're not necessarily doing it because of race. That's just a coincidence, but it's a lot of people. Like, it's a generational thing. Like, who can afford college tuition? People aren't making the same amount of money. So it's a economic problem that the whole city is experiencing.
Absolutely, and that was really the beauty of the West Side Future Fund, and you see other, and what we're doing at MARTA is to help the city as a whole and all elected officials, help everybody.
Y'all heard it here first. You heard it here first.
Credit. We're not trying to take credit for doing it. We're just trying to help, right?
Oh, no.
Solve the problem.
Wait. I am taking credit. Look, I'm taking credit. You heard it here first.
So the great things that are happening is people have realized that what's happened when you had this gap between a 10% return and a 20% return. You had agencies like Invest Atlanta, issuing grants to fill that
Try
gap
to fill the difference.
so that these projects can get built.
And
they've been
honestly-
doing, projects for the last several years in that way. But it requires enormous amounts of capital in order to actually produce so many units, because the gap keeps getting bigger and bigger because construction costs keep increasing and land costs keep increasing. So it's a problem that's exponentially getting more and more, it's getting worse and worse. And the amount of capital that has been dedicated to fill that gap is relatively stable. So what has happened is, and that's why I love what the West Side Future Fund was, about initially, is to raise capital that had a social impact purpose. It's still a for-profit fund, but it has an impact focus. So meaning we're willing to not take a 20% return anymore because we want to do good. And so the return is more like 4%, right? And so that type of capital, impact capital, is starting to be raised more and more across the country. And it's really one of the major ways to overcome the hurdle that we have right now. And but there's not enough of it out there. There's more and more of it coming, and more of it being formed. But and that's why I spend a good bit of my time on is trying to figure out how to make the capital stack work, because ultimately I'm a fiduciary to the board and all the taxpayers that pay into MARTA. And to deliver these projects, I have to ensure that they have a high degree of success and to actually get delivered.
Right.
And so I'm trying to anticipate all the problems we'll be facing.
Well, the first thing is community buy-in.
Absolutely.
Even though I'm excited, because just the fact that you're doing looking at AMI from a local level has changed the playing field tremendously, because that to me means that no other agency from the Housing Authority to Invest Atlanta can now say, well, we have to use the AMI that HUD has designated. Because if MARTA can do it, the other agencies can do the same thing. So that like, people really don't understand. That's a game changer to the west side of Atlanta, because you have Vine City, the Oakland,
Ashby, Westlake, and H. Holmes.
There's 5 stations on the west side? There's 5 stations on the west side. So you'll be doing mixed-use development around all of those stations. So between that, the inclusionary zoning, and I just heard that the mayor issued a moratorium. I don't know what that's going to look like, because it's
that's at Bankhead, and
that must be for the Gulch.
Well, so the area around the Bankhead MARTA station and the park has experienced a lot of new investors.
Grove Park,
in Grove Park, and so I think I won't speak for the city, but I think there was some concern over the amount of capital coming in and the plans that are being planned versus what the community was ready for. And
Look.
And we're in that the circle that was drawn for the moratorium. We are actually in that. Our land is in that area. So, but we've been meeting with we met with Grove, our CEO,
The Grove Park Foundation.
The Grove Park Foundation, and we've met with several of the owners right around our station as well. And but yeah, we do need to rezone our land for more density, and that's an interesting challenge. I'll back up. You mentioned community engagement. So one of the things that we're focused on right now in the process of getting this RFP out for these stations is community engagement. So Erica Pines, who you referred to, is fantastic. She is on our team and working to connect us to the right people. So our plan is really just a series of listening sessions. So we've started meeting with council members, APS board members, and then ultimately community members to really just listen. And I mean, just to give you preview our script, and it was basically, here's what we're doing. I'm going to stop talking now and tell us what your objectives are and how we might be able to help accomplish some of those objectives. And so far, the conversations have been fantastic. We've learned a lot.
I love our council person. He, I don't mind saying, I was really reticent because I was like, oh my gosh, who's this guy that just came off the street? But he has been, I think the fact that he did just come off the street has worked to his advantage because he's very in tune to community and he doesn't approach problems from the vantage point of we can't do this.
Right.
So that I love, and I know that affordable housing is big on his agenda.
Absolutely.
So tell us, with the stations, like you talked about the art and everything, what does that look like? Like, what will your developments look like?
Yeah, so just to be clear, MARTA is the landowner only. We typically do ground leases, meaning that MARTA will continue to own the land, and then we'll enter into an agreement where we'll pick a developer based on their proposal, their track record of execution, et cetera. But we do have policy guidelines that have been approved, TOD guidelines that have been approved by the board, and then our group has imposed like the zip code AMI, and there'll be some additional things like mandating that Fresh MARTA Market has a physical space at each of these locations. So, but to specifically answer your question, so we have focused on mixed income residential as the primary use. And the ground floor will contain a host of what we call our social infrastructure. So we have, kind of your typical sticks and bricks people would think of ability to hire and execute. But we also have the social infrastructure, which we are very proud of. So Fresh MARTA Markets, this is their 5th year of operating. Community Farmers Market is our operating partner. So we started with a USDA grant 5 years ago. We are actually talking to folks right now, private entities, foundations, to help support us and grow, bringing fresh food to our patrons and community members.
Y'all need to support our local farmers too. Like
and
you
that's exactly
mentioned, JR. He's a guy in the community that harvests honey.
Resident beekeeper.
Resident, and of course Rosario, who does the community gardens.
Right.
She's got on my case because my garden is like so she came over and she was like, look, I'm gonna come over and teach the kids. I was like, Rosario, I told you I got a brown thumb. Like if it'll grow, I could kill it.
Yeah.
Me and plants, I don't know. But I was really excited to hear that. All of the things that you had initially engaged, all of those discussions that you had initially engaged in with Vine City are coming to fruition.
It's true. I mean, I learned so much. So that I feel so blessed to have had that time on the west side because I learned a ton. I went in there with kind of no kind of presupposed, what is this experience going to be like, and assumed that I was completely ignorant about everything. And so that allowed me to go in with a very open mind. And I remember meeting JR for the first time. I pulled up to his residence right off where now Rodney Cook Jr. Park is going to be. And I get out of the car and he starts walking me around the yard, and I didn't realize when I pulled up that he was growing so many different things in his front yard, but if you just drove by, it just looked like junk, right?
Yeah.
But he had sweet potatoes growing over here and collards growing over here and all these cool things, and I'm thinking to myself, this is amazing. This person knows how to survive and grow his own food, and he is so educated about it. And we didn't even get to the bees yet, right? And that was fascinating. So I learned so much from him. I learned so much from Tillman. And there's so many people, that I was enriched by in the community. But you're absolutely right. So, I was actually with former Westside Future Fund person this morning, and I said, what's so awesome about what I learned is we were in a meeting, and this gentleman said, isn't all our work just about joy and bringing joy to people? And when you start with joy in the middle and then layer in food access and quality food and quality shelter and affordable shelter and safety and healthcare access, I ended up with something that looked kind of like, now my team describes it as a flower, right? So you have joy in the middle with all these different public art and access to art, and that's our compass, and everything we work on is through that lens. So if something comes our way, it needs to fit in. It needs to be viewed through that lens for us to really dedicate our time to it.
He's describing Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a African way of being, and as Nelson Mandela describes it, is I am because you are. Like, we are all a part of the collective, and if you lead that way, you can build the beloved community. So I think that is a perfect point to end on, and thank you so much. I would shake your hand, but I've been reading all that coronavirus.